Good morning, everybody, and welcome to April's audit meeting. In accordance with Section 43 of the Local Government in Scotland Act 2003, I have, as directed, this meeting will be conducted in such a manner as to allow remote attendance by elected members. I will now commence the meeting by first of all welcoming Councillor Brown in joining us on this committee. I hope it's an enjoyable experience for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Do we have any apologies?
Yes, Convener, we've got apologies from Councillor Hannah.
Yeah. Do we have any declarations of interest at this time? No. Item 3, minutes of the last meeting. Firstly, are they accurate? Happy to agree, Convener.
Agreed.
Thank you. Do we have any matters arising? Okay, we're happy to agree those minutes then. Thank you. Item 4, rolling action log. Do we have any matters to rise?
Convener, it's probably just to point out, let me turn to the page, sorry. The committee at the last meeting asked for a report on follow-up on the Madison primary school audit, and it suggested at the meeting that this would come after a follow-up audit, which is going to be sometime early in the new year. After the meeting, there was discussion with officers, and it's felt that the committee's intention was that they wanted a report on the first audit, what the actions were from the first audit, together with the dates, the agreed implementation dates. So just to correct the request in the rolling action log, it's a report on action plan arising from the first audit of Madison Primary School.
John. Mr. Reid.
Yeah, thanks, Convener. Can I just clarify what the actual actions that are absolutely required? Because we've had the first audit report. Members haven't seen the full audit report, and in the full audit report, there is a detailed action plan assigned against officers with identified timescales. Now, some of those actions have already been completed. Some of those actions are to be completed, I think, by the end of June. So what I'm wondering is a report required, or could that full audit report be released to members of the audit committee or as part of the members' bulletin? What's the best way forward with that, just so I can be absolutely clear?
Thanks. No, it's not the full audit report that's to be issued. It's the action plan that you refer to. It's the action points arising from the audit with the agreed timescales set out by internal audit and progress it's made so far.
Okay, so does that have to be...
So it's a report attaching that. It's similar to the report the committee got at the last month on Legionella, which I can discuss with you, and I can give you an example on that.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to the main body of the report.
Now, before you move on, can we have a bit of clarity about when that will come to the audit committee? It's just that it says it will come possibly, but no sooner later than February 26th. It's in the rolling action log. It sounds as if there's an interim position. Can you just have that clarified?
Yes, that was the point in bringing this up. So it was scheduled for 2026 because that's when the second audit is. This is a report that could come as soon as, I think Mr. Reid said, the action plan is there, so it could come to the next meeting if that was possible. I think that's the intention of the committee.
Thank you, Councillor Meikle-John. I'll now move on to the main body. Now, there has been a slight change. Item 5 and item 6 have now been transposed around. So instead of starting with item 5, we're starting with item 6 and then following with item 5. So Item 5 is now Internal Audit Progress Report. And I believe that's yourself, Isabel.
Yes, thank you, Convener. Good morning, everybody. The purpose of this report is to provide an update on where we are with completing our 24-25 internal audit plan. It also sets out the status of the remaining assignment that was to be completed from the 23-24 internal audit plan on the Bowness Recreation Centre swimming pool. Paragraph 5.1 provides an update on the completion of the 23-24 internal audit plan. A summary of 23-24 progress is at Appendix 1. The scope and the findings arising from the finalised review is set out at Appendix 2. Following the issue of the agenda, there's been some requests for the full report to be made available to elected members. Therefore, a redacted copy of the report will be issued to all elected members. This will include the Management Action Plan and recommendations. Paragraphs 5.2 and 5.3 summarise what audit reports have been completed, are in progress and are still to be started in 24-25. Paragraph 5.3 specifically highlights that some changes and additional unforeseen work in Manager Council's internal audit plan for 24-25 has impacted on the resources available to complete the Falkirk internal audit plan. A summary of progress relating to the 20 assignment areas in 24-25 is also at Appendix 1. Twice a year, I report outstanding internal audit recommendations to committee, as stated at paragraph 5.5. The results of this exercise can be seen at Appendix 4, which provides details of 5 recommendations outstanding at the 31st of March of this year. I'd also like to draw members' attention to paragraph 5.6, which relates to our continuous auditing work. I will report back to next committee once that data is available. So I'd ask members to note the recommendations and conclusions. That is that the 23-24 internal audit plan has been completed with the issue of the last report relating to the Bowness Recreation Centre swimming pool. In addition, the work that's been undertaken in 24-25 will contribute to the provision of a balanced and evidence-based year-end opinion. Members should also note the number of outstanding recommendations and actions taken regarding continuous auditing work. Thank you. I'm happy to try and answer any questions you've got.
Thank you, Isabel. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Convener. I have a number of questions, and I'll try and work through them perhaps in order. First, being just in relation to that final comment there is about the outstanding recommendations. The report indicates there's 5 outstanding recommendations in the papers, and I was just wondering about the ability for those to be caught up and when they're likely to be completed. And the other aspect that I would raise at this time is in relation to the resources available to Falkirk Council, considering that there's work to be done with Strathcarron, Hospice, IGIB, and with Clacks Council, and how that will be resourced going forward, as that seems there's significant levels of pressure in relation to that. If I could ask those questions first, Convener, and perhaps then come back on relation to the Bowness Recreation Centre.
Thank you, Councillor Meikle-John. Isabel.
Yes, the 5 recommendations that are outstanding, it's probably better that the services answer where they are with those recommendations, but you will see that in the action plan we have given the details that we have at this point, but I'm sure, and I actually know that in the dialogue to get the information into the report, that a lot of that work was ongoing to finalise those recommendations, but I think it would be better for the services to answer to those, if that's okay.
Thank you, Isabel. Is it Marie? You'd like to come in?
Yes, thank you, convener, and thanks for the questions, Councillor Meikle-John. We've actually got Kirsten Nightingale, who's the manager of our care homes, is actually online today to answer some of the questions about the outstanding items in relation to the monies procedures that's ongoing. So I might ask Kirsty to come in if that's all right through yourself, convener.
Thanks, Marie.
Yeah, it's fine to come in.
Thank you, convener. Yes, so the managing money procedure for care homes and Housemouth Care has been completed. We're just going through the final refinements to satisfy legal services. That's been completed today, and then we'll be able to issue it in time for the deadline of tomorrow. Once it's been ratified by Marie and Caroline Docherty and myself and legal services, the procedure will be added to the intranet and circulated within the internal care homes and housing and care services, and then we'll be able to close off all the outstanding actions.
Convener, just as a supplementary to that one, and I thank Kirsty for that, I guess, assurance, how would that then reflect on those of our residents within private care facilities?
If you care to answer.
From experience, private care homes would have their own managing money procedures in place, and we wouldn't be responsible for how those homes manage their monies.
Thank you, convener.
Thank you. Does anyone else? Does anyone else have any questions before I ask my own?
Convener, did that cover all the services with outstanding recommendations? Did anyone else got anything we would wish to add?
I don't know. Isabel, you had your hand up.
It was just to say that the other two recommendations were for police services, and so there's maybe an update there too. And then I can come back in for obviously to answer Councillor Meikle-John's other questions.
Paul?
Convener, the two other outstanding actions, as far as I'm aware, that are related to building security and in particular the reception area at the Foundry. One is in relation to the screen and looking at the privacy of that screen, as potentially people could identify who was attending meetings. There was consideration given to putting a privacy filter on the PC screen. That was identified as being hugely expensive. And the alternative is at the moment is to look at a film on the external windows, so you can only view out. However, that would actually detract from light coming in to the reception area. So there's currently a solution being looked at by the digital team. The other one was in relation to people attending meetings and events at the Foundry in relation to gathering in the reception area. And the customer and business support team are considering more detailed arrangements for escorting visitors. Both of those are currently in progress of being considered, but they are beyond what was the agreed date, but that is due to the reasons that I've just outlined.
Thank you, Paul. I'd like to ask that recommendations, they've no known implementation date. Can I ask why this is?
As I've highlighted, there is both in terms of the first one in relation to the PC screen or the TV screen, there is no simple solution of just putting a filter on it, and therefore IT will have to look at what can be done in terms of filtering the windows, whilst also trying to ensure that we can get adequate lighting into that area. And it may need that we have to actually refurbish the reception area to do that. That would be a hugely expensive activity to be undertaken, of which there is currently no budget, so we don't have a set date that would be. In relation to the second one, there is management arrangements and risk assessments that have to be undertaken. So again, the primary action, while sitting with us, it does rely on others' action in that. But I'll certainly take the views of the committee and urge colleagues to progress these as quickly as possible.
Thank you, Paul. I do appreciate the difficulty in the matter However, I feel the committee would appreciate best guesstimation, even if it says 6 months or whatever, with a progress update. Thank you. Oh, Isabel?
Thank you. So, Councillor Meikle-John, your other question was about resources and the impacts of Strathcarron Hospice, the IGIB work and Clackmannanshire Council, and how that adds additional pressure. So you'll see that we've obviously swapped around on the papers, and the next paper is the internal audit plan. So the internal audit plan, every year we work out what resources we have available, and then we work the plan up based on that. Obviously, it's not an exact science because things change throughout the year. That's why the reports always say that they have to remain flexible. But we try to work the plan around those resources, and that's what we'll do this year again. Capacity is never something that goes away because of the additional workload. Other things happen. We have to reassign work, look at things again. You'll see that 2 different audits this year haven't been started yet. That's due to a lot of that different work that's ongoing. But that's, you know, we've been working in the last year on an additional 2 reviews, so that's again another reason for some of those changes. I'm going to give a bit more of an update in the plan with regards to where we are with Strathcarron Hospice and Clackmannanshire Council and the services that we provide them. But just to give a bit of assurance around the work that we do work that in with the resources, and because we provide progress reports to this committee, you're always kept up to date and informed about where we are and where we're maybe struggling a bit if capacity is not there. Hopefully that helps a bit.
That's helpful, Convener. May explore that further in the next item.
Thanks, Isabel. Okay, moving on to the main part of this item is the Bowness Recreation Centre. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Convener. I think we should acknowledge the swift action that management took in passing this to audit, recognising it was a very challenging situation. And I think it's been really helpful and quite cathartic to be able to have this report and recognise that there's still a lot of unanswered questions there, but also that I think there is significant work being done that actually allows us to look forward rather than looking back. But I just wondered if officers could maybe give a little bit of an overview around what lessons have been learned, recognising that we no longer have the Falkirk Community Trust, but the relationships between the Trust and the Council at times appear to have proved a bit of a challenge that has been quite fundamental to where we've got to on this and to what we would maybe look to do in the future if we were to engage in a similar way with a third party to deliver services on behalf of the Council.
Paul.
Convener, as highlighted in the audit report, one of the key lessons learned was the communication and the recording of actions when issues were identified in buildings, and in particular in this one it was a fairly significant issue. And the key lesson learned was that communication needs to be regular. It needs to cover the key elements of maintenance and awareness on health and safety around buildings. And I'm pretty pleased to say that there is now processes in place. There is monthly meetings between all services and the maintenance team. Actions are identified and recorded at those meetings, and they're tracked all the way from identification through to completion. Very similar processes exist in relation as the committee will be aware in terms of statutory compliance. The same robust processes are in place in relation to maintenance. If we were undertaking works in relation to a third party, and we do have third parties through our commercial property portfolio, the exact same process applies and that there is those tracking of issues when they're identified all the way through to the actions being complete.
Thank you, Paul. Does anyone else have questions? Councillor Mickelson, sorry.
Just to thank Paul for that. I think that's helpful to understand that and have the assurance. But what I'm trying to get is we need to look at probably the roles and responsibilities where we have third-party organisations delivering services on behalf of the council, and making sure that that is monitored through regular meetings to ensure that they are complying with what was agreed under the memorandum of understanding. Sorry, I'm losing my voice here. Paul?
Where we have third parties occupying our properties, there is quite set out in the agreements the responsibilities for maintenance and repair. As committee will know, we currently have the strategic property review where there is a number of community groups that are responsible for maintenance under their licences whilst they move towards ownership or indeed leases. What I would say is that those are monitored and issues that are identified again are tracked from identification through to resolution through colleagues in the maintenance team.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions on the bonus? Councillor Brown?
Sorry, I couldn't, my thing's not going up. Sorry. I think most of these questions are probably for after we have the full report, but I wanted to kind of give a look at some of the questions that we're looking to find out. Things like, how was this report uncovered? What was the precise date of its discovery? And what action was taken on its discovery prior to it being shared with councillors? I have other questions, but these are kind of things that I'm looking to find out. And also if we will have access to the full report once it's available. And that's for Malcolm Binney.
Thank you, Councillor Brown.
Thank you.
Paul?
Sorry, Paul.
It's actually myself, convener. I'll leave Isabel to answer the question on the availability of the full audit report. In terms of the identification or the uncovering of the 2019 report, that was identified in January 2024 following a review of the condition report and the review of all the records in relation to Bowness Recreation Centre on its wider condition that was discovered as part of that process. We reported to elected members on the condition of the centre on the 31st of January 2024, and at that meeting I did mention that I had concerns about the condition of the pool, but not to sensationalise the matter, and that we would instruct structural engineers to report on the pool. So engineers undertook their inspections and reported back on the evening of Friday, the 1st of March 2024, which identified they had significant concerns on the structural integrity of the pool. And the decision was made to close the pool as quickly as possible, which was the morning of the 3rd of March 2024. So that's the chronological order of the discovery of the report through to the closure of the pool.
A final question. The report states that there were discussions between the trust and the council about what could be done and how to repair the pool structure. What's the evidence for this other than the outcome of tenders being commissioned? Are there emails, records or minutes, etc.?
Convener, that they would be highlighted in the full audit report, and I would refer to Isabel in terms of those. It's certainly pre-my involvement.
Thank you, Paul.
Isabel, did you want to come in?
Thank you. So the other question for me that you asked, first of all, was around the full report. So yes, there have been those requests noted, and the report will be made available depending how quickly we can get that organised. But yeah, I would imagine later today or not long after. So the evidence that we used for the report, I think you can see in the summary that there are a lot of unanswered questions, and we were saying there's no evidence of this and no evidence of that. I think what I would say the review was essentially trying to put the pieces of a puzzle together. And it goes back to 2019 when that report was initially written. The council landscape or the structure has changed quite a bit since then. We've spoken about the trust and how that was disbanded, and also there was the pandemic in amongst that. So that time has passed and things are different. So trying to get those pieces together, including speaking to staff, getting files, looking at all the data, when some of it was just no longer available, it did prove difficult. But everything that we could get our hands on, we looked at. There was no stone left uncovered as to trying to get that information. So where there were decisions noted, minutes, agendas of all types of meetings, where, you know, we looked at it all and we put a timeline together. So I would like to give some comfort around that we tried to look at everything that we could, and the review did take longer for that reason, because we were forever coming up with another way of trying to get more information to look at the facts and to be able to back up those facts rather than trying to surmise anything, because the role of internal audit is around trying to get a hold of the facts.
Yes. Thanks, Isabel. I think once we've had a look at the full report, there'll be more questions that we'll ask at a future meeting. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank you, Isabel. Brian?
Just to add to that response, while we talk about the full report, the version that we issued to members will be redacted to an extent to just make sure there's no data protection issues. So it's a full report, but it will be redacted in certain places.
Excellent. Thanks for clarifying.
Thanks, Brian. Does anyone else have any more questions before I go to my questions? No? Okay. I have 2 or 3 questions. The first one is for Isabel. Assurance level states that it's not appropriate. What does this mean?
Thank you, Convener. So this was an additional piece of work requested by the Director of Police Services, and it was if you like, a consultancy type piece of work for us, so fact-finding assignment. And so it wasn't one of in our internal audit plan, so therefore it wasn't an assurance audit requiring an assurance level opinion. So that's the reason why it doesn't have one.
Thank you, Isabel. Can I also take the moment at this time as a lead trained auditor myself to congratulate you and your team on this very difficult audit. I've been in similar positions myself, so thank you very much. I can appreciate the time taken and why.
Thank you.
On that note, I'll go to my next question. I've got to say here, again, as a lead auditor and a health and safety person, I have some serious concerns that this is now the 3rd report that's come to us that has serious CDM regs and health and safety non-compliances. I hope this is the last and I don't see them again, because it puts the council at risk, it puts the employees at risk, and I want it stopped. That having been said, we've already mentioned that has been lessons learned, and I appreciate that. For me, one of my questions would be on that note was, why was health and safety inspections not carried out? Malcolm or Paul?
Convener, obviously can't advise on the relationship at the time between the trust and the council and the maintenance inspections and health and safety inspections that were undertaken at that time. What I can assure the committee is that the current management arrangements in relation to the management of property compliance and property condition is managed through the corporate property compliance group. We now have a corporate landlord approach where health and safety and our dedicated property compliance team and maintenance team are regularly engaged, regularly monitoring the condition of our assets, and monitoring and actioning when they identify issues all the way through to their completion and resolution, and where it is appropriate, then items are escalated for decision making.
Thank you, Paul. My final question is regarding the 5 recommendations. Could the committee see an actual action plan for the next meeting? When I say action plan for this one, as with the Legionella and going forward, I would like this to be a standardised action plan as the national audit protocols dictate, which allows monitoring. And that would be the recommendation, the action, the due date, and finally the status. And the status can be completed, but if it says completed, I want the date it was completed so I can see whether it was a due date or not. If it's in progress, that's fine. If there's a delay, I'd like a simple one-liner saying why it's been delayed. But this is what I would like to see as a standard going forward so it meets the national audit protocols. If this could be provided, please, for the next meeting for the audit committee to review. Thank you. Do we have any other questions, or are we happy to agree and note this?
Happy to agree, convener.
And can we note that we've asked for an action plan
Agreed.
and standardisation? Okay. If we're all happy to complete that item, we will then move to the next item, item 6, the internal audit plan. And I believe it's back to yourself, Isabel.
Thank you again. So this second report from Internal Audit today sets out our proposed programme of work for 25-26 for approval. Paragraphs 4.1 and 4.2 highlight the requirement of the preparation of a risk-based internal audit plan as part of the new global internal audit standards, and that in agreeing the plan, committee should be aware that the priorities and internal audit resource could change over the course of 25-26. Therefore, the plan must be considered flexible. At paragraph 4.3 and paragraph 5.6, I've stated that I'll give a verbal update on the negotiations regarding the continuation of the internal audit service to Clackmannanshire Council and to Strathcarron Hospice. Discussions are currently ongoing, and I'm working with the Chief Finance Officer to scope out and cost alternative options in line with the resources available. Further updates will be provided at the next committee. The reporting arrangements and resources are in section 5. Specifically, the resources we've got available for delivering our planned programme of work at Falkirk Council are set out in the table at paragraph 5.5. The plan is split into 3 categories highlighted at paragraph 5.6. These include annually recurring assignments, committed assignments, and other client work. It tells you a bit about what each of those are. I would say that this year in the annually recurring assignments, time has been allocated to other types of annual but not direct assignment work, such as audit planning and preparation and attendance at committees, as well as other corporate and strategic meetings. The assignments that make up each element of the plan are set out at appendices 1 to 3. I've tried to give a little bit of detail on what the scope for each is likely to be, though again this may change once we start properly planning each assignment over the course of the year. The process for planning, undertaking and reporting on each individual assignment will remain the same as in previous years and set out at paragraphs 5.7 to 5.12. Paragraph 5.13 highlights that each year an internal audit annual assurance report is presented to committee. Internal audit will give an overall opinion on the council's risk management, governance and control arrangements based on the work that internal audit has undertaken over the course of the year, and that report will come to the Audit Committee in June. The report will also include a summary of all the work undertaken in 24-25. I draw your attention to the recommendations at paragraph 2.1. In particular, can I ask that the committee approves the internal audit plan for the year, but to bear in mind that the resources available to internal audit may change and the need for the plan to be flexible. Internal audit will direct resources to where they're most needed, and progress will be reported to Audit Committee on an ongoing basis. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Isabel. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you. I just want to build on the previous discussion that we've had around the resource, being very mindful and looking for assurance around the risks to Falkirk Council. With the additional work within Clackmannanshire, which I understand they require a bit more resource, but also that we've got the responsibility around the IJB, not just for Falkirk but for Forth Valley as well, and the capacity that is then required to take that on. Considering the very challenging and financial environment that we're in as well, I think that has to be taken into account, and the level of risks associated with that. But also an update on the discussions with Strathcarn, because it is highlighted that these are still ongoing, and to whether or not that is something that will be there, or something that we will need to look to commit to in the future. Just and because of the capacity, I'm concerned that the council could be put at risk, and I'm really seeking that assurance. Also, you spoke there in your opening presentation around the need to be flexible. And we have shown over the last sort of couple of years that flexibility has been required as there's been additional asks of audit that have been very, very timorously dealt with, but it's about whether or not that is something that can be built in going forward, recognising that adding more in means something has to drop off, and therefore having a priority system that people are comfortable with, and I don't know whether that's something that could be discussed with the Audit Committee about, if in the event of what, if we are asked to do something additional, what would be the ranking of the others, because it is related to risk. I just wonder if Isabel could maybe give a bit of a comment around that. Isabel?
Yeah, no problem. So the IJB work changes over every 3 years. So for the last 3 years, we have been the lead service because we do the audit work for Clackmannanshire Council. So we've been the lead for the Clackmannanshire and Stirling IJB. That has meant that that 3 years has now ended, and we're back to being the lead audit service for the Falkirk IJB service. There is a resource commitment agreed that the other parties or the partners will provide an audit service as and when required. So those plans are worked up every year, the same as this plan has come in here. That will go to their committees, and we've still to do that work with the Falkirk IJB, because we're still tying up the loose ends and the annual assurance work for Clackmannanshire and Stirling. So it's not that we will have to do that lead service for both. For me, it's basically a shift from one to the other, but with the potential for commitment still not to the same level on the Clackmannanshire plan. The hospice work is, I thought by today I would have more to say on it, and that we would have that clarified, what that was going to look like. But unfortunately, the decision hasn't come back from the hospice yet as to how they want to continue with the service and what that will look like. We're in the process of finishing our last audit for 24-25 with the hospice just now, and then we'll do our annual assurance work for them too. And I don't know if Amanda wants to say any more there, but I know that Amanda has been in dialogue with the hospice and is more or less just waiting for some information back. The other part of that question was around the flexibility and priorities once other work comes in and that we've not scoped for. And yeah, that is something that we have to consider when that happens. I think in the instances that you mentioned, Councillor Meikle-John, it's around the two that were added in 23-24, for example, Madison and the Bowness Rec report. Neither were small pieces of work. They did take a lot of extra time within the team, and I have to thank the team for their efforts there, because we were still trying to maintain the level of work that we were doing so that the internal audit planned work, you know, didn't falter at that time. So it was a lot of juggling of audit work and trying to get over the finishing line, and I'm glad to say that obviously today that's finally happened. I'd say the knock-on has been the fact that you'll see from the last report and this one that there were two audits that haven't been started, which were the Legionella arrangements follow-up and the pupil equity funding audit. But you will see that they have been deferred into this year's programme. So again, like other years where that has happened, we won't, you know, they don't fall off. We try to make sure that they're one of the first audits that we undertake in 25-26. And obviously there has already been quite a bit of talk this morning about Legionella again. So that is definitely a report that would be prioritised, if I go back to your initial point about priority systems. So I feel that we do try to do that anyway. And because we bring regular updates back to committee, I think committee should be assured that we are always looking at that to try and make sure that we are completing our plan with what we've got, and that anything that isn't and is prioritised will come through at a later stage. It obviously just will be that, it'll be at a later stage. I'm not sure if that answers everything that you wanted there, Councillor Meikle-John, but hopefully it helped.
The only thing that I am seeking, and that it might be more difficult to give, is the assurance that having the additional work will not put the council as a whole at risk, just through our own audit process.
Sorry, I
Thank
didn't
you,
answer
Councillor.
that.
Thank you, Isabel. Amanda?
Thanks, convener. I was maybe just going to give a little bit of an update, as Isabel referred to, in terms of the negotiations. So at the moment, we don't have an agreement in place for either Strathcarron Hospice or for Clackmannanshire Council for 25-26. And the reason, I think part of the reason for that is because we've been very clear with both parties that there needs to be a bit of a shift in the arrangements, and particularly with Clackmannanshire Council. The focus on the discussion is that we need them to put more resource into their team to support the work that's required. So they've been quite amenable to that. Negotiations are going quite well, I think. But that's we really need to conclude those two sets of negotiations to understand what the audit days are going to be available for Falkirk Council. So I suppose it's maybe just to give some reassurance that the sort of thing that's at the foremost of front of our minds when we're having these negotiations is about needing additional resource to support this work. And I think that we are making headway with that. We're hoping, as Isabel said, we would have hoped to have been a bit further along by the time we came to audit committee. But hopefully, sort of by within the next month, we'll have those negotiations concluded. I know resources is a sort of perennial issue. Obviously, we would love to have more resources within audit, but we are constrained by our resources and by our financial situation. And I think the audit the audit team do a really, really good job in covering the amount of work that they do. So hopefully once we get these issues resolved with Strathcarron and with CLACS, that'll put us in a much better footing for 25/6 and going forward.
Thank you, Amanda. Does any other councillor have any questions? I just have one, and it's to Amanda. Was the committee's suggestion from the last time discussed as a consideration, as in the funding we get from CLACS to carry out these audits be used to provide a even temporary extra resource?
I think, well, we're looking at resources as a whole. I think the challenge is that at this point we don't have an agreement with CLACS in terms of what's going to happen going forward. Part of what we've been looking at is the potential for CLACS to increase their own resource that we then manage and utilise and direct. That would probably mean a reduction in the funding for Falkirk Council, but that would mean that Clackmannanshire Council were paying for that additional resource. So that's in effect what you're asking for. So these are the types of areas that we are looking at, but as I say, we haven't got a sort of firm position with that yet.
Thank you, Amanda. Appreciate that. Obviously, my health and safety background, I'm just concerned for the staff welfare. I don't want mental health burnout issues occurring. But thank you. I appreciate for the update. Is there any other questions on this item? That being the case, can the committee note and approve the plan?
Happy to agree.
Agreed.
In that case, then we'll move on to item 7. And I believe that's Paul. Pauline, sorry. Pauline.
Thank you, convener. Morning, everyone. The paper I'm presenting to you this morning is our annual audit plan for the 24-25 audit. I'll just draw out a couple of items for your attention. At paragraph 5 of the plan, we outline the scope of the audit. Essentially, it encompasses an audit of the financial statements and the annual report and accounts, and also conclusions on the council's arrangements with regard to the wider scope areas required by public sector audit in Scotland. We also report on the council's arrangements for securing best value. Exhibit 1 of the report, this outlines our materiality levels that we apply to the audit of the financial statements, which we'll carry out later in the year. We have an overall materiality level that's set at 2% of gross expenditure, which gives us £17.6 million. That's based on last year's audited accounts. Once we receive the unaudited version of accounts for 24-25, we will revise that figure, but it will remain at 2% of gross expenditure. We also calculate a performance materiality figure, which is essentially an auditing trigger point, whereby if we identify any errors or misstatements in the accounts during our audit work, we would take a step back and consider whether we need to perform additional audit procedures to assure ourselves that we're not at risk of exceeding the overall materiality level, which would obviously have implications for my opinion on the accounts. In addition to that, we have a reporting threshold of £350,000, and that's essentially the level at which we would report to this committee in our annual audit report at the conclusion of the audit any misstatements or errors that exceed that level of £350,000. As part of our planning and risk assessment work for the audit, we identify any significant risks of material misstatement to the financial statements. And you'll see there in Exhibit 2, we have identified one risk. Members will have seen this risk in previous years. It's a standard risk that we are required to include in all plans for all audits by the auditing standards. And you'll see there, so it relates to essentially management's unique position to be able to override the financial controls that are in place. And we have a number of planned audit procedures that we carry out in that second column there. And the team will carry that out as part of the audit, and we'll report on our findings in our annual audit report on the conclusion of the audit. At Exhibit 3, we have a table here that outlines the risk assessment procedures for the group audit. You'll be aware that Falkirk Council is part of a group and prepares group financial statements. The auditing standards for this year are slightly revised, and they require us to bring to your attention a bit more information than we would have done in previous years. Our approach to the audit doesn't change, but we are required to just highlight a couple of things, and that's why we've included Exhibit 3. You won't have seen that in previous years' annual audit plans. It essentially just outlines the various components that are included in the group accounts, the accounting treatment for those, whether there's any risks, and what our audit procedures will be during the audit. The next section of the plan outlines the wider scope and best value areas, and you'll see there at paragraph 20, the 4 areas covered by the wider scope areas in line with the Code of Audit Practice. And we'll report on our findings with regard to those in our annual audit report. In the best value section at paragraph 23, members will be aware that in a change to the approach to best value, the Accounts Commission required us to carry out each year a thematic review, and this is year 3 of that approach, and transformation is the theme for this year's work. And we will bring a report on that work to this committee in June, I think. Just to give you an update on that, the work is well progressed and a draft report has been prepared, and I expect to be able to share the draft with management in due course, probably by the end of this week, hopefully. Finally, the last section of the plan outlines the timetable for the audit. We are aiming to have the audit concluded and the opinion signed by the end of September, which will bring us back in line with our pre-COVID timetables. You'll note there in the Exhibit 4, there are a number of TBCs in there. That's just essentially a timing issue at the point at which we submitted this plan for committee papers. I don't think we had confirmation of what the committee date was going to be, but I think now it's been confirmed as the 30th of September. So we can obviously work towards that and sign off by the end of September as planned. That was all I wanted to say with regard to the plan, but I'm happy to take any questions or comments from members. Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Convener. It was only one question that was to ask a wee bit more, and I don't know whether it's the auditor or whether it would be Amanda in relation to Exhibit 3, where Falkirk Council has a risk of material misstatement in relation to Exhibit 2 around fraud, and I don't know whether there's a bit more clarity about that particular situation and what we'd be able to do to mitigate some of that, so that there is not the material risks or it's not as high.
So perhaps I could come in there. Yes, so the risk of fraud is essentially a risk that exists in all accounts, and it's related to the position that management have and their control over the financial systems that are used to prepare the accounts. Auditing standards require all auditors to consider that to be a significant risk for all bodies, for all sets of accounts. So if you were to pick up any annual audit plan for anybody, you would see that risk there. So it's not a risk that's unique to Falkirk Council. It's a standard risk. The planned audit procedures we have there in Exhibit 2 are standard procedures that we carry out, and we've carried them out in previous years. And just to give assurance to committee, we have not come across any issues with regard to that risk, and we've not been in a position where we've had to report anything that would indicate that there is a risk there. It's just something that the auditing standards require us to do, and we are content that the council has a number of robust arrangements in place to prevent and detect any risks, any fraud that there may be in the financial statements. But I don't know if Amanda wants to add anything to that.
Amanda?
Thank you. I'm just thinking that, we've heard the various, get the update reports from internal audit. There's a series of audits on our systems and our controls, which is really helpful and should help to, as part of that mitigation that Pauline referred to. We also have our annual assurance statements that all the directors have to complete, where we have to disclose things like any related parties, if there are any, where we have to highlight any concerns we may have around controls or systems. That's all reviewed by Isabel and her team, and then that all feeds into the annual governance statement as well, which is prepared as part of the accounts. We also have financial controls as one of our risks in our corporate risk register. It's a medium rated risk. So there's a number of mitigations in there, and I update that on a quarterly basis based on information that I'll get from Isabel or from the knowledge of what's happening out in the services. And then we do have a number of fraud. We've got a fraud action plan, and we've got a number of actions in there that we update on a regular basis as well, and committee gets the updates on that. And so there's a lot of activity that happens in this area to try and give our auditors, ourselves, the assurance that there's mitigations in place to try and identify and prevent.
Does anyone else have any questions? I'm relieved I don't have any questions on this one. Other than just to confirm, Pauline, you did say that you're looking to meet the deadline in September for the end of the report and for us to sign off. Okay, in that case, are we happy to note and agree the report?
Agreed.
Happy to agree.
Okay, moving to the final item for today, item 8, and I believe it's yourself, Malcolm.
Mark's going to provide a brief to the report.
Go ahead, Mark.
Thanks, Convener. Following the previous audit committee, we requested for a report on the outcomes of the governance of fuel audit summary report contained within Appendix 8. As the details of this, the audit itself highlighted both areas of limited and substantial assurance. And with regards to the aims of limited assurance, we've detailed what actions were put in place very promptly to mitigate those and to provide the areas of substantial assurance that the auditors were looking for. Sorry. I think within that report we've also detailed that we've actually went over and above the recommendations laid out by audit, and we've introduced a new role, which we actually shortlisted for this morning. We'll hopefully be interviewing next week, bring in a performance officer just to provide that further assurances with regards to fuel use and also with use of vehicles in general going forward. So that will hopefully, as a result of that, we are able to provide a much greater assurance to audit and to the committee that both fuel use and vehicle use has been managed within the council.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Maitland-John.
Thank you. Just on that, Mark, just talking about the new role, and it mentions a couple of places in section 7 around additional resources staff being brought in. Firstly, how are those resources going to be covered? Is it within the existing budget? But what is the role of this new person going to be? Just have a bit of understanding of what actually is it they're going to be carrying out.
So, with regards to budget, it has been met within existing budgets from fleet services. The role itself is a new role that we've brought in, and there is a number of items on the job description, but in regards to this, what we're looking for is
to provide just that additional assurance with regards to fuel. Reports are sent to, I think today's reports are sent to managers, but this could be quite a large amount of transactions each month. And so what we're initially looking for is to focus on, out of hours use, out of area use, what jumps out and should be highlighted to a manager immediately, so that there's less chance of any issues being missed through the reports, as I say, just the volume of it. And again, it's just hoping that that provides greater assurance in regards to fuel use.
Thank you, Mark. Does anyone else have any questions? No. Sorry, Councillor Forrest.
Sorry, Mark, you said there was a large amount of transactions in the report. It states 1,388 for sample of 61 vehicles. 61 vehicles, what sort of ratio is that? Is it large enough to make a full conclusion? 61 vehicles is approximately about 12% of the 13% of the council fleet. This was the auditor carried it out on. I'm not sure about how they chose those particular ones. I mean, the positive from that was that throughout those transactions, they found no evidence of any sort of fuel theft. All transactions were accounted for and verified by managers. Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Is any other questions at all? Just for your information, Councillor Forrest, 10 to 15% is an average. It's what the railway use as a sample set. No, I know it doesn't, but it is a sample set. Just for your information. Okay. I don't have any questions again as such. However, there is one request we require when it comes to Appendix A, and I've already mentioned it earlier regarding the action plan. Whilst it's a very good action plan, it's missing the due date and the completion dates. So if this could be revised to show that, it'd be an extra column with the dates put in and sent back to us for the next committee. Oh, sorry. Just if it could be just provided. Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Then can we agree this and note?
Happy to agree.
And also note the revised action plan. If there's nothing else, then I'm happy to close the meeting. I hope you enjoyed your first meeting, Councillor Brown.
I did, thank you. It was very informative.
No worries. I'm always happy if you need any advice as well.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you very much for attending. The meeting is now closed.
Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.